Hey, and welcome to I Was Just Thinking. My name is Heather Deveaux, and I was just thinking about taking this computer and throwing it out the window. My beloved computer that I've had for years is doing something real weird today, and it has sent me on a wild goose chase trying to figure out how to fix it. I have been sitting here for like hours now. I have made one trip to Best Buy to try to rectify the situation, and I have just kind of given up and said, forget it, I'll start again. So what I actually want to talk about is how to write a romance novel, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened to me this morning first, because I just got to get it off my chest, all right? I'm not even going to apologize. I sat down to edit episode 7 of the podcast, which was originally going to be about a road trip that I had taken recently. And it was about a 45-minute long episode, and I saved it, or at least I thought I saved it, walked away from my computer yesterday, sat down today to edit it, had the whole morning planned out. I'm going to have my coffee, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to listen to the episode, I'm going to create the graphics for it, I'm going to write the description, I'm going to post it, I'm going to schedule it for Monday like I do all the time. But no, the computer universe world people, trolls, had something else in mind for me, and it's probably most likely 100% my fault. I didn't realize that when I hit save that my disk was full. What is a disk, you ask? Fuck if I know. But I found out today the hard way that a disk is a drive on your computer, like your hard drive. Literally, when we talk about computers and we talk about hard drives, we have hard drives that save our information. And I think mine probably was full because when I opened up my storage folder, again, fuck if I know, open up my storage folder, it's just this gleaming red bar of like, you don't have any storage. And so I tried for a little while to erase some of the stuff on my computer, like I have been doing. This computer is like 5 years old. Like it's been around the block, but it works so well. It's a Dell, and it works so well. I have no complaints about it that. And I need to say, I'm a Mac person. Like, I do love Apple, but I bought this computer because my son is a gamer, and he was like, no, you need to have all these other things for the things you want to do, or that I was doing at the time. So I bought a Windows desktop gaming computer. Brilliant machine, love it, except it's only got 219 gigabytes of storage on it. Except that's not true either, because when my son come home for lunch today, I had showed him, oh, look, I went to buy a 2 terabyte external hard drive because my hard drive is full. And I had tried to erase some of it, and I thought, I can't be doing this. I can't be trying to make space all the time. So that's why I made the quick trip this morning to buy a hard drive, external hard drive. Thought I was like beating the system. So my kid takes one look at my computer. He goes, your hard drive's not full, it's empty. And I was like, what? No, that's the hard drive I just bought today. He went, no, it isn't. Your C drive is full. Your D drive, which is your hard drive, your 1 terabyte hard drive, is not full. In fact, it's quite empty. In fact, it is literally empty. There's nothing there. He said, you never saw that? And I said, I'm not sure what we're looking at. And he said, this bar right here next to the red bar of death, my C drive is gleaming red, like red alert, you have no storage. I have a terabyte of storage, which is why I bought the goddamn computer in the first place. I remembered today that I did have a terabyte of storage on this computer. I just wasn't making the connection between the red bar of death and the gray bar next to it that was just like lovely and empty. I didn't know that was my hard drive. So anyway, joke's on me. Now I have 3, count them, 1, 2, 3 terabytes of storage on this computer, and I don't need to upgrade anymore for a long, long time. So he showed me how to move the files and things like that. And I gotta tell you, nothing on this planet makes me feel dumber, because I'm a pretty smart cat. And I figure out a lot of things on my own, especially when it comes to technology. I just didn't know. I was always just saving things to one folder all the time. Nothing makes me feel dumber than when my kid is like, what do you mean you didn't see it? Or when I had to go into Best Buy to buy a hard drive, and I had to ask, what is a USB-A now? And the poor clerk was like, well, that's the original USB. I mean, why don't you just call it that then? Why do you got to give it like a different name that confuses people who grew up with USBs? I remember when they were like invented. I'm that old, but like Why do you gotta be calling it something fancy like USB-A? So anyway, that's the start of my day today. Now I'm finally back at my desk and was just remiss about the fact that my original podcast episode is gone. Gonzo, see ya. So I decided I'm not going to bother re-recording that because there's nothing else that drives me crazy like having to do things twice. So I already feel dumb, but I want to get a podcast episode out this week. So we're going to talk about how to start and finish a romance novel, how to write a romance novel step by step. I'm going to walk you through my step-by-step system. So this came about why I want to talk about this because recently somebody had reached out to me on Instagram and I was talking about, I don't post a lot on Instagram anymore. Actually, I haven't posted anything on Instagram since July, I think. But somebody had reached out and said, in response to something I'd posted on my stories, about my 7th romance novel. So I've mentioned here before that I write romance novels. They are the smutty kind, not the young adult kind. They are definitely for adults. Written by adults for adults, to be clear. And I was talking about how I'm almost ready to launch this 7th book. I'm working on the edits for this. I'm on my 3rd round of edits. It's going very well. It wasn't in the beginning, but now it is. And that's just part of the process. And so this person who had followed me for a while reached out and said, hey, can I just like pick your brain, get some advice? Anyway, I wrote them a monologue of sorts back to the point where I was like, I'm going to have to write this on like a Google Doc and then copy it over into Instagram because I was writing so much in response to the simple question of how do you get over the writer's block and how do you find the motivation to keep going and where do you get your ideas and how do you actually make yourself sit down and write? And so I thought, well, hell, I've already got half this thing written. Why don't I take it a little bit further? So you can go over to my blog, heatherdeveaux.com, and you can find how to start and finish a romance novel step by step in writing form. I will link it to the show notes for this podcast, but I want to go through this process to walk you through it because I think it's really valuable because I think actually you could apply this to almost anything. And I've mentioned before that, like, I'm a starter for sure, but I have figured out in my adult life how to become a finisher as well. And so I am in the process now of getting ready to finish and start launching and promoting my 7th romance novel. And I do self-publish my romance novels, just to be clear that this is the process I'm going to take you through. But I also right now have boxes and boxes and boxes of my other 6 romance novels. So it's 2 complete trilogies that I have written from their books 1, 2, and 3 for 2 complete trilogies. One of them is called the Blurred Line series, and that was released in 2023. And the other one is called the Selfish Love series, so another 3 books, unrelated, but with like a little throwback to the first set of books. That's called the Selfish Love series, and there are 3 books in that series as well. So my 7th book is just a standalone book. It's not going to be a trilogy, and it turned out that that was actually the hardest part for me was say less, Heather. As you may have noticed, say less. But when I wrote those books, I used the first set, so the first trilogy, the first 3 books I wrote, standalone trilogy, that I use that as kind of my learning curve. And I taught myself how to do these things. And the second set, so the Selfish Love series, came so fast after the first because I had created the process to do it and I knew how to do it now, that I thought when I sat down to write the 7th book, oh, I got this in the bag. Anyway, it's been almost 1 full year since I've been working on this 7th novel because it's been really difficult for me to A, say less, and B, say less with like some class. It's like really difficult for me to work on this book. It has been really difficult. And so I found that it wasn't as up to par with what I had produced previously. So I kind of had to like shake that off and get over that story I was telling myself about, you know, why this book wasn't as good. And then I just decided that like it was good and I got back to working on it and now it is actually good, if not better than my other 6 books. Because it is its own unique thing now. It's a standalone novel. It's a complete story from beginning to end. And I want to talk about how I wrote that and then how I wrote these other 6 books in, basically I wrote 6 books in a 2.5 year period. So almost 3 years by the time I started and finished it and got it actually published in the world. So let me just talk a little bit about, to start, why I like writing and why I like talking about writing. And ironically, this is the first time I've ever really talked about my writing process. Of all the podcasts I've ever done, I've never sat down to talk about my writing process. I will talk your fucking ear off if you ask me in real life. But I love writing simply because I like creating something from nothing. I like having an idea and I like taking it and trying to turn it into something in the world. So when this person reached out on Instagram and asked me these questions, like, I'm not going to lie, I was like, oh, I could tell you a thing or two about this because I love it when people ask me about my writing process. I would rather talk about the process than the books themselves. That is true. I could talk all day long about the process. And I think that that's like my business brain, my analytical brain is like, we're constantly, and like we as in like me and my brain, we're constantly looking for like, where are the systems, processes, and frameworks to make this work? Not just for us, but so that I can turn it into something that I can teach to people later. So that's definitely what we're going to do here today. I'm going to teach you how to write a romance novel. So one of the things about my writing process is not that it's super secret. It's just that it's mine. Some of it is a little counterintuitive to what you may have heard before if you've gone looking for some advice on how to write a romance novel. But, I'm just delighted to be able to share this. And so I want to get into this with you and give you a step-by-step process to do this. The other thing that you can get over on my website, heatherdeveaux.com/blog, is you can get a resource, a quick reference resource for how I create romance novels and really how I write anything, like right down to blogs. This is how I do stuff. But we're going to talk about it in terms of romance novels. So let's talk about my writing experience before we dive into this. So before we dive into this, I want to tell you about some of my writing experience. So some people write one book and then turn around and try to teach other people how to do it. Some people start a business one time, they create one product, and then they turn around and try to teach people how to do it. And that's not what I'm trying to do. I actually have written over a dozen books in the last 10 years, both romance novels. So I've written 6 romance novels and published them. And I've written, I think, 5 or 6 nonfiction business books. So I have a couple of books in the world. Some of them are not available anymore. One of them is available on my website. If you go to heatherdeveauxbooks.com, it's called Your Entitlement is Showing. It's one of my favorite business books I've ever written. And we're not going to talk about the business books now, but it is just to say it is one of my favorite books that I've ever written. But what's funny about writing romance novels is that the physical process of writing, it's actually not any different from writing a nonfiction book. And I knew that, but my brain couldn't wrap my head around it because I kept telling myself this is going to be harder. And I had to just remind myself that I taught myself how to write business books. I could probably teach myself how to write romance novels. Just like, it'll be spicier, So the spice factor doesn't take away from how much work goes into writing a romance novel. I do want to be clear about that. In the same way that the lack of spice in a nonfiction book makes it boring. Because like I said, Your Entitlement is Showing is one of my favorite books I've ever written. So more than writing books, though, I have been writing my entire life. I've been making my living as a writer of some kind, usually educational, in some form or another. And I started my full-time entrepreneurial journey as a freelance writer, actually creating content for other businesses, creating educational content, creating online courses for them, writing content in that way. So before that, I was actually doing educational content for universities, for colleges, for other businesses and nonprofit organizations. And I once had a side hustle where I wrote a career newsletter and sold ads within the newsletter to fund it, so that there was like a job board before the job boards on the internet took off. I had done that for a while. And, basically I'll write on a napkin if I've got a half clean one. That's kind of like my jam. It's always been my jam. So I don't tell you about my writing experience to scare you off, because you might be sitting there chewing your nails thinking that, I've got no writing experience. But what I want you to know is that writing experience is not something you're born with. I was not born with a pen in my hand. Okay. I was not born with a computer stuck to my fingers. I had to learn how to do it. And yes, I think I have a natural inclination towards writing, but that is only because I have an interest in it. I am interested in creating good writing Not all writing comes out naturally good. I think that's an important distinction to make. I think all of the interest in writing that I have doesn't actually make it easier for me to sit down and write, except I want to sit down and write because I am interested in writing. So I think for a lot of people who have a tentative interest, they have a like, maybe I'll try this. Sometimes what happens is that they let that bad first draft or the lack of a draft, maybe you've only got a couple of words on a piece of paper, deter you from actually trying to get into this as a like, not a way to make money, but like a thing you do. I make no dollars on the books that I write. Like, I just want to be very clear about that. I'm not making a living as a novel writer. I write novels because I fucking love writing novels. I think it's really fun to have an idea and write a story and tease out the story. But like, I'm not making any money writing these novels, okay? So I do it because I'm simply interested in it. And then once I have a finished product, I'm going to put it in the world because like maybe somebody will buy it. I've actually sold 150 copies of my books, but they're not profitable by any means yet, okay? So if you have a tentative interest, the good news is that you can still write. And even if you're not always keen, it doesn't mean that you can't ever write something good. And that something that's kind of bad couldn't become good later. So I want you to kind of start there. And what I've learned about being a writer is that consistency wins every fucking time. How did I write 6 novels in 2.5 years? I sat down to write them. But there was a willingness to learn how to get the words on the page. One of the things I just said to my son recently, he was writing an English research paper, was he kept trying to get it right from his fingertips. The words from his fingertips, he wanted to get it right. And I was like, you just got to get some shit on the page. You just got to get some shit on the page. Like, just write what you're thinking and we'll make it better later. And of course, you know, he was like, no, it needs to be perfect. And I was like, oh, you're cute because you're so young, but that's not really how life works. So you have to have a willingness to learn not only how to put words on the page, but put words on the page that might not make sense or that aren't very good, because all we're looking to do is move the needle. So despite the fact that I had written several business books before even attempting to write a romance novel, I knew they were the same and yet very different animals. And I knew how to string some sentences together to make a point, and I knew how to share a perspective from the perspective of a nonfiction book, and I knew how to conduct research to promote my ideas and build foundations under my arguments. But when it came to getting a character that I had to invent out of thin air from the start to the finish of an entire story and make sure there were no holes in it, which is the thing I am always desperately afraid of, is that my story is going to have plot holes in it. I knew I had a couple of things to learn, and that was okay with me. I knew I didn't know exactly how to do it, but I was willing to learn. So I think that is such an important thing to remember, that, yeah, I'm a writer. Yeah, I'm a good fucking writer. Yeah, I can write a lot and I can write really fast. But I still had to learn how to do it this way. I had to learn how to create this other kind of writing. It wasn't natural for me. I'm not a natural storyteller. I have to think about what I'm going to say before I sit down to put it on paper. All right? So I want you to find comfort in the fact that even as somebody with a lifetime of writing experience, quote unquote, I still had to learn how to write a romance novel. And there is no secret sauce to being a writer. None. Zero. No secret sauce. There is not a magic formula. You do not need to buy a course on how to do this. It is simply sit down and fucking write. So anyone that tells you that it is a God-given talent is a liar, and they probably lack real self-awareness. Writing is a skill, just like math is a skill, just like riding a bike is a skill. You can learn it, you can develop it, you can be better at it than other people, you can suck at it more than other people. It's not a sliding scale. You don't have to compare yourself to other people. You just have to get the words on the page. So I want to show you how you can, in fact, start and finish a romance novel in case you have questions about it and you want to learn how to do it for yourself. So let's talk about where I find ideas for my romance novels, because like life, it's my favorite question. Where do you get these ideas? People ask me after they read the books, where did you get the idea for this? Well, life. You know, ideas come from life. And I write contemporary romance novels, which means that my stories are happening in the here and now. Like, my characters have jobs. in the here and now. And I love a good dragon romance as much as the next person, but that's not the kind of writing that I'm into. I'm into men with money, women who don't settle, and navigating the realities of dating in the real/fake world of my fiction romance novels. I'm also super obsessed with happy endings. And even though I don't plan to get married again in my lifetime, my characters always get their beautiful weddings. And did I know that that was going to be a framework for my romance novels when I started writing them? No, I didn't know that. And the first ugly draft of my first romance novel was wildly terrible. But once I got that wildly terrible version on the page, I learned how to make it better. So where do the ideas come from? Life, just life. Here is one of my best tips for being a good writer. Read. I read, and this is no joke, over 100 romance novels between 2022 and 2023 to do research. What makes a good novel good? What makes a character so good you want to sink your teeth into them? What makes you miss characters when you finish the book? I studied this for a whole year before I even started writing my own fucking novels, okay? So like, again, not just assuming I would know how to do this, but arming myself with knowledge. I studied the covers and the designs and the titles, and I noticed that there were trends in writing and that there were trends in the way a book looked and felt in your hands, not to mention the fact that there were trends in the tropes, so like the themes, there were trends in what kind of characters were on the page. So you can get your ideas from anywhere, and I'm willing to bet that you have got some ideas already. Like everyone who says they've got a book in them, I believe them. And I think everyone who has an interest in writing can write, but they are held back by the belief that they don't already know how to do it, so they must not ever be able to know how to do it. And I just call bullshit. I'm a smart fucking cookie, and I still had to learn how to do this, and that's okay, because learning is super fucking fun. So I have based every single novel that I have written, and now I have written 7, on one single thought or an idea. And so I want to walk you through what those thoughts or ideas are to help you drum up some ideas for yourself. All right. So these are the ideas that sort of sparked my romance novels. And I remember the moment when each one of these ideas came to me. And they don't always come to you the way that you think, like, oh, you're in the shower and you have an idea for a book. No, most of my ideas fed off of one original idea that just kept growing and growing, and that's how I ended up with 6 books. So If You Met Me First, which is my first novel, I wanted to write an office romance. That was the thing I wanted to do more than anything. I wanted to write an office romance so that when I sat down to pick apart the first shitty draft of my book, I decided that the book was actually going to be an office romance book. It was that simple. That was not the book I had written, but when I had walked away from it and come back to it, I was like, actually, I'm going to rewrite this because that is what I want it to be. I want it to be an office romance. That's where I want to start. Heart First, which is my second book, I wanted to write this book about finding yourself on a road trip, the reference point of like, what does a cross-country road trip actually look like? So my shitty first draft of this one was, I want to have this character go on a cross-country road trip. So I wanted the main male character in this book to be the brother of the woman in the first book. So that was how I connected them to keep the story going. The third book, called I'll Go First, this was such an interesting book to me because when I started writing this book, I like literally couldn't stop writing it. I loved these characters. And what was really interesting about this book to me was that I immediately knew my characters are all like what I would categorize as middle-aged. So 35, 40, 45 years old. And I knew that I wanted my character in this book, Joel, who like is my favorite book boyfriend of all time. I wanted him to be a guy who had never gotten married, but had been building out a life for a woman that he had yet to meet, but he knew he was going to meet her. He just knew it was going to be a matter of time. And he didn't know that she was going to be made of like fucking wildfire. And so I wrote this book. I related these characters back to Heart First and If You Met Me First in the first 2 books. And then all of a sudden I had a whole world of people just trying to find love. And that was the whole premise. It's just like these people are just trying to find love. Some of them don't even know that they're looking for it, but there it is. So this was my enemies to lovers trope that I had so much fun writing. And that was just heated with something that is almost hard to describe. It was like more than anger, but it was like lust, like animalistic lust. I love it. I'll go first. If you only read one of my books, read that one. It stands alone very, very well. And one of the things that I worked really hard to do, was to make my books be written in a way that you could pick them up in any order and read them and not feel like you missed anything, but that they are actually interconnected in many, many ways, but they're their own standalone stories. In my second trilogy, the Selfish Love series, I was obsessed with the idea of second chances. So the first book in this series, called Girls Like You, I wanted to write a book about a man who was still in love with his high school sweetheart 20 years later. So they're like 40-ish now, and they haven't come close to finding love in anywhere, other area of their life. And then they find each other again. But there's a really fun twist in this book about them being high school sweethearts that you'd have to read the book to find out about. But that was what that book idea was. High school sweethearts 20 years later. Boys Like Me is book number 2, and this is my favorite one in the series. It's the idea of one night stand turn long-term romance. So again, all of that like really hot and heavy conversation and banter and the issues and the situation between the two characters. I knew I wanted to write that. And then Men Like Us, I had just finished reading Red, White, and Royal Blue, which is a gay romance, and I loved it. And I was like, I wonder if I could write a gay romance. And like, not that I'm trying to make light of that at all. It was so difficult to write, but it was so fun to write. So fun. So Men Like Us is a gay romance, and those two characters, Grant and Ellis, I adore. And Girls Like You, Boys Like Me, and Men Like Us is the second series, the Selfish Love series, and they're all intertwined and connected, but can be read as standalones as well. What's interesting about this series is I buried a secret in the books that is only revealed later, but ties the whole story together. And that was such a fun revelation for me to have and then to create. So my current novel, when I was writing the blog, I actually hadn't titled it at the time, but the idea for this novel, which I have titled since, is called One Thing at a Time. So the book is called One Thing at a Time. It took me almost a year to come up with that title, just to be clear. All my other titles came to me like a bolt of lightning, no problem. That was it. I was happy with it. But this one, again, writing a standalone novel, I don't know why, it just felt so much harder to me, but I had a really hard time naming it. So when I landed on One Thing at a Time, that felt normal, that felt natural, that felt like that is definitely the name of the book. But this book came from the idea, I had a line, like a saying in my head. I imagined a waiter going up to a woman in a restaurant who was a fan of her writing, so she's an author in the book, and he says to her, as she's reading the wine list, there's nothing on that wine list written as well as your book. And I thought that line and went, fuck, I need to write that book. So that's where the 7th book came from. So here's the thing. You could start with a single idea, a thought, or a line, and go from there. There are no rules, and do not let anyone tell you there are rules, my friend. There are no rules. It's your project. You get to decide what constitutes a good idea. For now. I mean, there are guidelines, but there are no rules. So what do you need to write a romance novel? Like nothing. You got a pencil and a napkin, you can write a romance novel. It is a very common question. I do get asked it quite a bit. I just use Google Docs, and I know there are plenty of writing tools and software programs on the market that you can pay for that make your writing so much easier, but I don't care about those things. I just always think Google Docs. It's where my whole life is. I'm just going to write everything there. I have it. It travels well. It saves automatically. It's good. So how do you start? Well, you're going to start at the beginning, okay? And this is where my advice gets unconventional. But I need you to know that this has worked for me my entire life. I stand by this. It might not work for you, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway, because this is my process and this is what you're here to learn. If you're still listening, you want to learn how to do this. I want you to consider, even if this is not how you would do it, that it might work for you. And I want you to be open to that. So when I start writing, whether it's a blog post or it's a romance novel, I write from the beginning. I start with the very first line. And the reason I do this is because, one, that is how my brain works from a start to finish kind of mentality in a linear fashion, A, B, C, D, E. And I can see the end result long before I get there, which means that I just have to keep writing if I know where I'm starting and where I'm going. I just have to keep writing. The second reason that I do this is that I find it really helpful to know what the fuck I'm writing about. So what is the main story? So in the case of my trilogies, I can track events or issues that are happening in the book back to where I started. If I do not have a starting point, that gets really convoluted in my brain, and that is where the major plot holes come for me. And that's why when I go back to edit my books, I can edit them easier than most people edit because my story is told from the beginning to the end. I'm not trying to duct tape it together in the middle. I'm not trying to rewrite parts to make them fit together. My story already fits together. I just have to make sure there aren't any fucking gaping holes in the middle of the story. And if there are, it becomes obvious that there are because, well, I wrote it in order. From the first line, I always start with my prologue. Literally write chapter 1, my prologue, I write the prologue first. I want the backstory. I want to know what that's going to be. I want to know how to set my reader up for success with the book. I start there. And here's the thing. The learning doesn't stop even after you've written 7 books. I am still doing research about how to write these books, how to make them better. Here's the best piece of advice I got when I was doing really heavy research before I started writing my first novel. The best piece of research I got was to start your story at the last possible moment before the major conflict happens. And one of the reasons why we tend to think our writing is not good is that we just use too much filler. And like, I'm long-winded. Fuck, what is this, like a half hour already I'm going on about? But when I'm writing, I take you right to the action. Get you right to the point where you're getting on the roller coaster before the roller coaster crashes. I'm not making you walk through the park and play a game and have some cotton candy. I'm putting you right on the platform to get on the roller coaster. If you read any of my books, you are 2 pages away from something major just happened that you're going to need to have information about for what you're reading later. And I'm not writing drama or mystery. I'm writing romance, okay? This shit works. Open your book with something important at the beginning. Start at the beginning, pick an important point, start there. It grabs attention and it helps you to latch onto your story. And because you've already decided something is happening right away, it helps keep you invested because you want to keep writing to see what's going to happen. And that is one of my favorite parts of writing is I get into writing so hard that I'm like, I can't wait to find out what happens. I can't wait to see how this is going to play out. It's so much fun. But what happens when we're writing is we tend to think that like it's going to be so hard we don't start. And we don't give ourselves a chance to experience what the hard actually feels like. And so that's why I say to you, just start writing. And don't just start writing anywhere. Start writing at the beginning so you can get excited about your own work. If you need permission to be bad at this, I bless you, bad at this. Okay, there is no prize for writing a good novel on the first go around. And it's going to take you longer than you think. And it's going to be more work than you think. So just settle in for it. Just accept it. Be like cool with it. Okay, I'm on my 7th novel. And it ironically is taking me longer to write this one with 6 ones in the bag than it had taken me to write 6 novels almost together. Okay. My second piece of advice, write in sequential order. Again, this might seem counterintuitive to some people where a lot of people who are giving writing advice say, just write pieces and then fit it together later. Write what you know, write what you think, write the scenes that you're really interested in and then fill it all in later. I cannot do that. I've tried to do that. It does not work for me. My brain goes, but what happens now? Or what happened first? Or what led them here? And I would rather have all the answers to those questions. So I write my novels in order. I might not write them properly. I might not do them justice, but I get the idea on the page of like what brought Tucker from his office down to Carly's office that made him give her a hug in the middle of the day, that made her question what she was doing with her life, that made them go out to dinner, that made him create a project for them to work on, and now they're having pizza on the floor of his office. How did that happen? Well, fuck if I know, except I do because I started at the beginning. It started with a beer and a plate of nachos and a phone call for a job interview. I started there. Most writing advice is write as it comes to you. My advice is write it as you want it to happen. Write in order. This means you can go back and fact check your own writing, which again is something that's super important to me. If I say something about my characters, they have curly short hair, and then later I write that they have long straight hair. If I have written this out of order, that is going to be hard for me to fact check. And that's just a simple example, but like you can imagine the books I've read, hundreds of romance novels, where like they don't get that right. And these are professionally published books and they're not getting that shit right because they're just puppy milling this stuff. And I'm taking the time to write something that makes sense. And I'm not worrying about getting it out quickly. I'm worried about getting it right. And so how I guarantee for myself that I'm getting this right is that I do it in order. What about the outline? Yeah, you're probably like, why haven't we talked about an outline? Yeah, I don't do outlines. I'm sorry. My bad. Like, we can move on from there. All right, let's just talk about this for like 10 seconds because I know you're probably like, I need advice on how to write an outline. No, you don't. You don't. You don't need advice on how to write an outline. By starting with one idea at the last opportune moment before the conflict happens, and by writing in sequential order of the events happening, you can follow your thoughts and feelings. So you can write without an outline. I do it all the time. I don't create an outline when I'm writing these books. I follow my gut based on how I think my characters would react in this situation, and I'm writing it as if it's happening in front of me. It's like I'm literally describing what Joel and Julie are doing in the restaurant, fighting over whether or not they love each other. I'm writing that as if I'm seeing it happen in front of me because I have written what led them to that restaurant. And once the fight happens and she runs out of the restaurant, I get to decide then how Joel reacts. So I don't have an outline to follow because I don't want to have to predetermine what happens and when and why. I want it to flow out of me. And maybe you're saying to yourself, well, that's not really fucking advice, but it is. Try it. Just trust that what you're writing, if you know where you want to go, which is my happily ever after, I know they're headed towards a happily ever after. I don't have to play any games with myself. If I know where they started, which was fighting over a Camaro in the front lawn of her house, and I know that they're going to get married in the end. Spoiler alert, I've already told you that. I started by telling you that. All of my characters get a happy ending. If I know they're going to the end and it's going to be a happy ending, I can do whatever the fuck I want in the middle, and I can follow the flow of the characters. So when you hear people say things like, it just came out of me, or this shit writes itself, that's what they mean. They mean I'm letting the character develop in front of me. I've not any preconceived notions about this character. Why? Because they're human. In my mind, I miss these characters. I read my own books sometimes because I'm like, God, I miss Joel. How come I can't meet a man like Joel? I love him in like real life. If he was a dude, I would be dating him. He might be the only one I might consider marrying. I wrote him for myself. I love him. And I love him because I was able to write him from the perspective of this is what this kind of man would do in this situation. Why? Because he's a good fucking man. That's what that is. Okay? So I know, counterintuitive advice, probably like, you don't like it, but that's what I've got to offer. So all I'm saying is be open to it and try it. So one of the things that you've probably noticed here now is, we're 40 minutes into this. I've spent basically 40 minutes, with the exception of the first 7 minutes, bitching about my computer. I've spent the last 33 minutes talking about how to get started. Because that's what most people say. I don't know how to get started. And if you start in the middle of your story, you're going to complain that you don't know how to go back and you don't know how to fill in the blanks. Or you're going to have an ending, but you don't know how to get them there. And so that's why I bookend, no pun intended, I bookend my story. I know how it starts and I know how it's going to end. Again, I just get to fill it in the middle. And so that might not make sense to a lot of people, but if you plot that out on a piece of paper and you go back and you read what you've written and you kind of do it in reverse order. So I don't start with an outline, but I will go back and I will plot my story once I've written it. That helps me to see where the holes are. Okay? So when it comes to finishing your first draft, my advice is this. Every time you sit down, finish a chapter. Just finish a chapter. Don't write 10 words. Don't write 500 words. Don't write 7,000 words. Finish the chapter. However many words that is. I know people are like, write 100 words a day, write 50,000 words a month. Like, I don't know what any of that means, because when I sit down, I'm writing a chapter from start to finish, and then I move on. Now, whether or not I write a second chapter, it does not matter, because I've written a chapter in this one day. And if that is the thought, and I'm writing every single day, well, it's no wonder I put 6 books out in 2 years, 2.5 years. But that's not what was happening either. I was writing every now and then. It's not my full-time job. I don't get paid to write, like I said. So I'm just writing, but when I'm sitting down to write, I have a clean opening and I have a clean finish. And that means that when I'm sitting down to write, I am moving the needle forward. Here are some things I do when I'm writing. If like I can't remember something or I haven't made a decision about something yet, I will just earmark it. I will use placeholder names. I will use placeholder events. I will use placeholder people. I will use placeholder issues. I will go back and I will fill them in later. I just need to get the information out of my head. I can clean it up during editing, which I will talk to you about. But not yet, because one of the things that I want you to know is that when I am writing my first draft of a romance novel, I do not stop to edit it. I do not go back and reread any of the information I've written the day before or the week before. My only goal is to write a shitty first draft as fast as fucking possible so I can finish it. I can go from my conflicted opening to my happily ever after at the end. I write things as I think they're happening, and I just keep writing. So when people say, oh, I get stuck or I come up against hurdles or it just feels like too much, it's because you're ending mid-chapter, you're ending mid-thought. So start the chapter, finish the chapter, and then move on with whatever you're doing. This may mean your chapters only get to be 2 pages long. You can fix that later. Most of my chapters run between 4 and 8 pages long. If I start going over 8 pages, I just call it done. I'm like, that chapter's done. I gotta fucking move on. Because when you're putting it together in the end, you don't want chapters to be too long because you lose your readers. But we're not going to talk about that. We're talking about like how to just get this thing on paper, okay? One of the things that I do spend a lot of time on while I am writing, and this is super interesting, is like, yes, I am writing, but I might not be physically writing. I am sitting at my desk, I am looking at my screen, and I am thinking about the problem that I have created of my own volition for my poor characters. I'm thinking about how they're going to solve it. Now, here's something about the way that I write. I write what's called a dual perspective novel, which means that my 2 main characters, so I'll use Tucker and Carly, for example, from If You Met Me First, my first book from the Blurred Line series. I write from his perspective and I write from her perspective. And sometimes I overlap the 2 of them, but mostly I keep them pretty clean. And why I do that is because first of all, I love a male character's perspective. I think that's one of the reasons why women love romance novels so much, is they get to hear from the other side, even though they're all written by women, which, like, spoiler alert, is why they're so great. But one of the reasons I love that is because it helps me to consider the conflict I've created from a different perspective. That is where a character is born, and that is where a character dies a terrible death if you can't figure out what makes them have a problem and solve that problem with conviction that belongs only to them. So Carly would solve a problem different than Tucker, but the way they solve those problems together is the reason that they're a good couple. To think through those problems, I could spend a long time doing that, and I absolutely consider it writing because it is contributing to the process of what I'm putting on the page. And I will not walk away without putting it on the page. I will always finish that chapter. Again, I will sit down with a beginning and an end in mind, but I have this one moment in time, which is this chapter, whether it's Carly's chapter or whether it's Tucker's chapter, and I'm going to write it from beginning to end. I'm going to finish that chapter so that even if I've spent an hour staring at my computer screen trying to figure out how Tucker's going to get his ass out of this one, I'm going to write it before I walk away. Now, when I am writing from a dual perspective, I think the importance of capturing how the characters feel is important. And you got to get this part right, which is why writing from beginning to end in order, sequential order, matters. because your characters develop as you write them. If you are writing them all over the board in different scenarios and different situations, and you're trying to piece that together later, you're going to end up with a hollow character. My characters, and I've been told this by several of my readers, my characters are so complex because every time you run into them again in another chapter, I've added something to them. I've made them answer a question. I've made them pass a challenge. I've made them deal with a conflict that adds a layer to them. And that has unraveled naturally because of the way I have written the book. I get to decide how would Ava respond to Gail in this situation based on how I've set her up from the beginning. I don't have backstories for my characters. I don't have references for my characters. 2 things I write down for my characters: what color are their eyes, what's going on with their hair. Because I use that in descriptive language when I'm, gushing over my characters in writing. But otherwise, what their bodies look like may or may not show up. What their skin color is may or may not show up. What their music preferences are may or may not show up. I don't really care about that stuff. I care about what does their partner see and like about them, and how do I bring those to the surface when I'm writing. So how can you know when your first draft is done? Well, because I use a happy ending framework, which I guess is a thing, I know what I'm working towards before I even sit down. Now, whether that ends up being 80,000 words or 250,000 words, I don't know. My Selfish Love series is over 350,000 words in total, but it's 3 books, but you could call it one story because it does wrap up real good together. But when I sit down to write, I don't have a word count in mind. I don't think about I have to write 100,000 words for this to be a novel. I just keep fucking writing. It helps that I'm long-winded, but maybe you are too. I'm working towards the finish line. However long it takes me to get there, I don't worry about that because we can cut and we can add later. I just want to know what is getting me to that finish line. So I know when I'm working towards that finish line, and I'm sifting through my writing in real time. I'm problem solving on the fly with my characters. I'm deciding where to take them. I'm deciding what fires to put in front of them. I'm deciding what the plot twists are. I'm not getting caught up in the fact that none of it's perfect. I'm just writing it. My mind runs faster than the keyboards, the fingers on the keys. I can think faster than I can type. So as long as I keep going and I keep my brain engaged in the story, eventually I will get to the point where they get their happily ever after and my draft is done. I pay attention to the fact that the conflict has been resolved. So if you're saying to yourself, yeah, but how do you know? It's when the conflict has been resolved. What is the thing that is stopping them from being together? And when does that become resolved? And that's how you know you can wrap this shit up. Anytime after that point, unless you're a sadist like me, you're oh, but I'm going to throw something else in here, and oh, I'm going to throw something else in here, and oh, I'm going to throw something else in here, which you will learn to feel out yourself. You'll know it needs something more. But when you're writing that first draft, it's anytime you get them to the resolution of the conflict that you set out to create, you can wrap it up. That's a good first draft, okay? And I know that my characters have gotten what they want, and the story mostly holds up. We don't have to worry about all of it holding up, right? Because we've written in sequential order. We had a beginning. We know where the ending is. We've gotten there. We can call it done. If my story mostly holds up, my characters have gotten what they wanted, then I just have to find a cute way to wrap it up, and Bob's your uncle. And then I'll write an epilogue about how they lived super happily ever after, because I'm a sucker. Now, here's what I want you to know. You're going to be super excited to finish your draft, but then your characters are gone. It's just done. It's dead in the water now. Now you got to edit it, okay? And we're going to talk about that now. So I love the writing process. I do love the editing process, but the editing process is just sheer work. It is not super creative. We're cleaning up a tsunami of a mess that we've just made. And it requires even more attention and dedication than the actual writing process because it can get to be a slog. So I'm going to walk you through my 4-step process for how I do my edits to make this as simple and easy as possible for you, okay? So let's just use the happy ending framework. We've gotten our characters to their happy ending. We're calling it a done, shitty first draft. we're going to do a first pass of edits. I don't care if you start this right away or you wait 3 months. The time doesn't actually matter. You're going to do a first round of edits, and here's how you're going to do it. You're looking for major story holes only. We're not fixing periods and commas. We're not worrying about grammar. We're not doing punctuation. We're not worrying about, little things like that. We're looking for, did we call them the same nickname every time? Did we make sure that if their dad is dead, their dad stays dead? Did we make sure that the place that they met for lunch is referenced properly again later? Those are the first round edits, okay? We're just doing a high level. Does the story stick together? Next, we do a second round of edits. The second round of edits is where you are looking for developmental edits, like emotion, conflict, and resolution. So are those things aligned with the character traits you have given to your characters? So all you're looking for is, if Joel is a good man and Joel would do this, does Joel continually do this throughout the book? Now, can you put these two things together, these two steps together and do them, or all four of them and do them together? Yeah, but why complicate it for yourself? You have to read an entire novel 17,000 times before it's ready to publish. So give yourself some grace and some space here. So the second round is what I would call developmental edits. The third round is I make a pass on screen and then I print it. So the first 2 rounds I'm doing on my screen. I'm just click, 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 edit, 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 type, type, type. I do that one more time on my third round of edits, and then I print the whole thing. I create a single PDF from my Google Docs, and I have it printed at Staples. It costs about $30 to get it printed, sometimes a little bit more, depending on how big the book is. And I do a line by line edit. So I look at my screen, and even now I'm reading parts of this from a screen, and I'm mixing up the words. So even though in my mind I'm reading it correctly, it might not be correct on the page, and so I need to see it in front of me. If you're tactile at all, which I am, you will find a lot of mistakes on the paper that you wouldn't have found in the Google Doc or in the Word doc that you're using. So what I do is I am able to make notes, I'm able to scratch stuff out, I'm able to rewrite, I'm able to add, and this is where we can actually start cutting and moving physically parts of the story if we have to. So you can just literally use some Scotch tape and tape it back together. That's a real thing, okay? The final draft pass is once I have made all my updates to my PDF or my Google Doc on my screen based on the paper version I had, I will send a proof document to my printer. So I have edited effectively. I call it a 4-step process, but really I'm doing a first round of edits. I'm doing a second round of edits on the screen. I'm doing a third round of edits on the screen plus a print. And then I'm technically doing a fourth round of edits on the screen because I'm making those updates on the screen based on my print edits. So that's actually 4 edits. And then I get a proof copy from my printer, so from my publisher. Then I do a full edit of my proof copy. So that's 6 rounds of edits, okay? And when I get my copy from my printer, so from my publisher, I go through every fucking letter in that thing, and I guarantee you, even after 8 rounds of edits, still gonna find a typo, because our brains miss this stuff, right? So you can have an editor look at it for you. I do it all myself. I don't want to have to pay someone to do it. So I do it all myself, and it takes me about 8 full rounds of edits by the time I'm done, and that can take months to do it. Once I have made the final changes to the proof copy for the publisher, I have to one more time send my proof to my publisher to get printed a final time. I have to then read it, no joke, a 9th time. Okay, might even be a 10th time by now, depending on how shitty those proof copies were the first couple of times. But minimum 9 before I could say this is ready for sale. Now, how do I do that so fast? I like my own writing. I write stories I want to fucking read. And I still want to read them. 3 years out, I still want to read about Tucker and Carly. The very first book I read, I still want to read it. I still read it and go, oh yeah, right. It's so fun. I understand it sounds like a lot. I understand it is a lot. It is physically a lot. It is mentally a lot. And it is one of the funnest things you can do with your time. So I use a pencil. and I mark up my proof copy until I get it the way I want it. And then I request a final copy, and then it's ready to sell. And that's it. But none of that matters. How many rounds of edits I do not matter until I have a shitty first draft. So when you're sitting down to write, do these 3 things. Number 1, start at the beginning. What is the very last thing that happens before the conflict arises? Just jump right into the story. You will thank yourself for doing that. Start at the beginning. Write in order. Go from A to B to C. Don't jump to F or to H. This happens, then this happens, and this happens, then this happens. And the last thing is, do not edit while you write. Do not judge your writing. Do not go back to read it. Just write it. Write what you feel. Write what you think. You can clean it all up later. And have fun. You do need to write. And that is the overall arching advice. Just write. But then you can edit the fuck out of it. And then you'll have a book. I hope you have an amazing day. And I'll talk to you soon.